Okay. Bring this up. All right, thank you. All right, very good. Welcome this evening. We have tonight the final budget review for fiscal year 2008. Appreciate all the members of City Council and City staff being here, and I see different departments represented as well. Last night we had our final second half, if you will, of the public hearing, which we heard a few folks speak there. What we'll do tonight is we'll start with an introduction from the city manager, who will briefly review a couple of options that have been discussed. Sure. And then, if you may recall from last year, I'll get up, roll up the sleeves, so to speak, and we'll talk it out and see what kind of consensus we can reach tonight. So thank you very much. Here we go, John.
Thank you, Your Honor. As everybody is aware, last evening I did distribute for the public and the City Council a document that showed what we refer to now as Option A and Option B. And Option A, looking at the sheet, primarily just recapping it, there is a reduction of $100,000 in operating, and that's a result of better than expected health insurance rates, and we appropriated those to the various departments, as you can see, and reduced those departments as described on the sheet. Then we have non-operating expenditures, and as requested by the City Council, we did reduce the capital outlay by $270,000. I did decrease the county tax by $100,000, and again, the explanation for that is looking at what early on when we put the budget together, we did have to be a little bit more conservative. We used a percentage of 9.5% overall of the pie, so to speak, of the entire county. We now see that they have adopted their budget at $38 million, and we're going to use a 9% estimate as a percentage of the entire county, because we look back at some prior years and we feel comfortable with that. So we're able to drop that down by $100,000. And then the contingency, we are proposing to drop by $100,000. This year we have been lucky and have not had a major hit to that contingency. I think to date we've had to spend about $6,000. So we will encumber those funds into next year, and then take the contingency for this year and drop it by $100,000. I feel comfortable with that. So that we have both in the operating and non-operating a reduction of $570,000, or a reduction of 16 cents on the tax rate, which brings the tax rate down from 78 cents increase to a 62-cent increase, or $16.34 over, and that is 3.9% over last year. And moving on to Option B, it's pretty much the same as Option A, except that the only difference is in the operating expenditures. You see we put a line for $400,000 reduction in operating to be determined by the City Council. So if the City Council wanted to tonight and go through and reduce operating by $100,000 in various areas, either municipal, police, fire, schools, or a combination thereof, you could reduce that total down by $670,000, or an 18-cent decrease in what was proposed at 78 cents, or 60 cents, which would be 3.8% over last year, or $16.32. So that's basically how it could work. I think we have the basis for getting us down where the council wanted to be. It's at this point open for discussion, Your Honor. And then what I'd like to do is, once we get to a consensus from the City Council, I do have pro formas of the resolutions that you would see on Monday or Tuesday, whatever date you decide you want to do it, so that we can go over those, make sure you're comfortable with them, and know what's in store for the night we adopt the budget. So,
very good. Okay, well, that's a pretty quick but effective summary of what we have in front of us. What I'll do now is, and hopefully it'll work as well as last year, I'll go up, I'll grab the mic and a couple of markers, and then we'll take them department by department. Want to get feedback, you should feel free. This is a discussion, so you should feel free to bring an idea up and open it up for discussion. Right now, unless I need to be corrected, the budget, you see the Option A and Option B, but right now the budget as it stands that would require amending does not include any of the adjustments.
Right,
These
and-
are simply suggestions at the moment.
Right, and for the council's information and those that have picked up the sheet, the first sheet actually is the original budget summary schedule, which has the original budget, gross budget of $80,428,802, or an overall increase of 5.45% over last year. Anything you reduce, you'll see it's broken down to operating and non-operating, and then it also has the revenues and then the tax rate listed on that summary sheet.
Okay. Can you hear me all right? All right, there we go.
I think, Councilor.
Oh, sorry, Councilor Dwyer.
Mayor, rather than starting with the departments, I wonder if it makes sense to start with non-operating, just because that's kind of where action already sits, where the largest reductions are, and that would help us, it would help me frame whether or not we need to look at departments.
If that makes sense to other, Councilor Smith?
Just one question before that. Are we starting with option A as at least the baseline? With taking into account the reductions in health insurance costs and so forth? Just as a baseline to begin
I
with.
mean, the health insurance
Is a
is
given.
a
Yeah,
given.
is a
so
given, so
no harm to anybody
Right.
because it's not
just
there
to
anymore.
start there.
I was looking at option B, but I mean,
I am too, but I'd like
I
to
guess
at least
the-
start with the
I
baseline.
don't think we should even look at option B. We
Okay.
can't take any more
So
money
let's,
out of there.
maybe if we start with option A as the baseline and then begin with non-operating.
I think that's, that would be let me just make sure we get some broad consensus that option A would be the starting point for the discussion. It would require, in terms of the formality, that we approve that, but that's, Councilor, you're right on. And then I think Councilor Dwyer, starting with the non-operating beyond that, probably makes a lot of sense, too. Councilor Dwyer, Grasser, rather.
Would you move the chart to just slightly that way? So it's easier for us to see.
You mean, like so?
Yes, like, that's perfect. It's a lot easier for this side to see. Thank you.
And then give the cameraman a moment so we can get it.
he's got it.
That's good.
Okay, so let's start with the non-operating. You see in front of you $270,000 in recommended reduction. And I'll open it up just to start it off. Assistant Mayor.
Yeah, I have a question. Maybe the city manager can clarify it for me so that I get it straight. We have, in looking at non-operating, and I think Councilor Dwyer's choice is a good one to start with, if we can avoid operating. If contingency is currently $400,000 and we have spent $6,000 in this year, when that $400,000 is indicated for next year, is that new money drawn from taxes? So correct me if I'm wrong. So does that mean we have somewhat shy of $800,000 to work with?
You have to remember, if I can get into an accounting, a fund accounting discussion here, and I guess I will.
Well-
Because when you encumber the money, we have to encumber it for certain purposes, and we should, the encumbrance really, you don't want to leave that encumbrance lying out there for a long period of time. Typically, it's 180 days, and then you extinguish the encumbrance. We've probably gone beyond the 180 days in many instances, and that's fine, but truly, to say, the idea is with fund accounting, you do not want to make it a habit of feeling you can carry those monies over from year to year. Those monies typically go into what is known as operating surplus eventually, then into fund balance. That's how our fund balance increases. So eventually, those encumbrances are extinguished, and they're extinguished by virtue of an operating surplus. So, for example, at the end of a fiscal year, no reflection on any department, let's say police, for example, has radios that they've purchased, that they've ordered, but they're not going to be coming in until September, but they've ordered them in the fiscal year. We would encumber that money, and so let's say the radios come in and they're $100,000, and that's what they've encumbered, but because of whatever circumstances, they got a discount, and now we only paid $90,000 for them. That extra $10,000 that was encumbered would then be extinguished and would go into an operating surplus. You would release that encumbrance into a surplus.
I guess, and I know it's probably an accounting lesson and nothing else. I mean, we don't come up with $400,000 as low-hanging fruit at a meeting like this, and I understand that. But how much is encumbered? And if
We're
you can
gonna-
make it general, or will you explain?
With contingency, if you decide to take it down, I will encumber it the full amount, and I will encumber it because of, with anticipation for unanticipated expenditures. But I can't leave that out there forever.
Forever.
You know, so, yeah, I could probably get us through next year, half a year, but, you know, I mean, that's fine. But it all depends on the year. I mean,
Right.
I mean, and if we don't have that, you could, and I'm not saying we should, but if you didn't have that, if we ran short, what you would have to do is you would have to then, in accordance with the charter, raise and appropriate that money.
Right.
From fund balance, or some others, you could do a supplemental tax if you wanted to, but you have to go through a series of, I believe, two votes at a public hearing. And a 2/3 vote of the council.
I probably still don't understand it, but is it generally right to say that the 400 that exists for this year, not what is in for next year, is encumbered and called for likely with expenditures that have been, you know?
Yeah,
okay.
typically.
And I'm
you
just
would-
trying to get a sense of where the money ends up, and if it goes into fund balance, what does that mean?
Eventually, eventually, the fund balance or our surplus didn't just materialize.
Right.
It had to come from something. So at the end of the fiscal year, we typically will have, let's say we have more revenues than we anticipated, and we've expended less than we anticipated. So together, those are known as operating surplus. Okay, so at the end of the fiscal year, you have, let's say, $1 million of operating surplus. What will happen is that money will then go into fund balance for June 30th, 2007, which will then increase our fund balance to where, we are now at about 9.5%. Let's say at the end of the year, we've underexpended by $500,000, but there's another $500,000 in anticipated expenditures that are not going to be made by June 30th, but they were intended for the fiscal year 2007. The departments will give that list to the finance director. I'll look at it to determine if that is in fact the case, and we'll sign off and say, yes, we will encumber those funds. And then during the course of the year, as they get in, let's say, their equipment or whatever it is, their training that they had scheduled, whatever it is, then we then take and pay and then reduce that encumbrance. Once that encumbrance is all expended for that purpose and there's money left over in that encumbrance, that money then folds into surplus.
And what are we typically adding to the surplus on a year? What do we typically add to surplus once you've dealt with encumbrances?
Well, we're now at about 9.5% for undesignated fund balance. Undesignated fund balance.
9.5% of
The previous year's budget.
previous year's
I'm
budget.
sorry, I should have
Okay.
mentioned that.
Okay.
Which means it's about $5.9 million now? $6 million now.
Okay.
And where is that shown?
That's in your financial statements.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, our yearly.
Yeah,
our
you want to look
monthly-
at it, if
our
you want,
monthly.
we can take
Yeah.
when we do the financial statements, and we look at our balance sheet,
Right,
that's,
right, right.
assets minus liabilities equal.
So we're
Fund equity.
adding 750, 800,000 a year.
It all depends, because the other thing you have to remember is we have set up what is known as these stabilization funds.
Right.
So we don't always take
Right.
everything that is at the end of the year, that is operating surplus, and put it to undesignated fund balance. What we do is we have the leave of termination fund, we have the health insurance stabilization fund, we have, the debt service stabilization. So what happens then is that we take a look at that, and there may be, for example, let's assume that we didn't get to bond the library until a certain time. And in that fiscal year, we had set aside $200,000 for debt service repayment. All right. So now, we don't have to pay that in that fiscal year, but so we have
Right.
that money extra at the end of the year. What we do is we take that surplus, it goes to operating surplus, then it goes into fund balance, and we designate it for debt service reserve. Because ultimately, you're going to, if I didn't, what's going to happen is you're going to say, geez, why did we budget for this twice?
Right.
So it goes there. Or, for example, on the health insurance, where we're going to have a larger savings this year than $100,000, we're probably going to have $800,000 in this budget. But we're going to take that money, and at the end of the year, it's going to go into operating surplus, and then we're going to designate it for our health insurance stabilization fund. Because there have been years where we've only budgeted, let's say, 11%, and it's coming at 22%. So we take out of that stabilization fund to stabilize.
Is overlay treated the same way, or does it go into a different kind of account balance?
Overlay is different. You want to explain that? I can't explain it, but I don't want to mess it up.
But what do
It's
you do-
unique to New Hampshire, by the way.
What do you do with the balance for overlay? That's my
That
question.
falls into a liability account. We do have a reserve for tax abatements, and we also have a liability on the balance sheet. So at any given time, at the end of every fiscal year, we have a list of any potential liabilities, anything that's outstanding. So we have to carry that from year to year.
So, for example, if somebody files an abatement, that ends up as a liability for us.
Right, but presumably, at some point, these encumbrances for overlay related to liabilities also.
Excuse
Not an
me.
encumbrance.
No, overlay is different.
Okay, that's what
Overlay
I
is,
want to understand.
overlay is different.
Okay.
It's treated totally different, because let's assume, I'll take it to property. Let's assume that there's a property that we have valued, and the property owner is basically saying, no, you overvalued our property, right? And our value that we put on a property generated $100,000 in taxes. But the property, he says, will generate only $50,000 in taxes. I won't get into the calculations. So now we have a difference of $50,000. We have to reserve that liability, because now we have a potential court case, which we have that liability and that exposure. So, but then in the meantime, we may get close to court and we settle that, and we come in the middle, and so now, instead of generating $100,000 and getting to his $50,000, we're now at $75,000. We have to pay, we have to pay him back the the $25,000 with interest if it goes out 3 years, and then that stays within the overlay account until we have future other liabilities.
So that's more like an ongoing pool.
Correct.
It doesn't go
Correct.
in and out of any of these
Correct.
other funds. Okay.
Exactly. And the one thing I would have to say is that we had a reval year last year, and typically when you have a reval year, you're going to have people that are going to you're going to have a higher spike in abatement requests. And we have probably about 300.
268 abatements for this year alone, but we still have abatements filed for '04 and '05.
So what happens is they go through multiple years. And then we can have, and I won't mention any names, some large entities in the city that will file. And if you're not careful, and you don't have enough reserved, and I don't know if there's any council members do remember, but I think at one point you had to bond one of them about 10 or 15 years ago.
Certainly did.
Yes, you did. You had to bond, so the money wasn't, it's easy, you can take the overlay out. But ultimately, if you are not successful and you don't have the money set aside, I'll have to come back and say, because you're legally responsible to pay that with interest. Now, for those that are listening and think that, this is a real problem, that we're losing money, well, quite frankly, you're not losing money, because you really never had it to begin with. I mean, you really were just holding their money, and a judge and an assessment people have now looked at it, and you've come to a conclusion that the values were a little bit higher than they should have been, and you bring those back. The one thing I would have to say about Portsmouth, our assessor does a great job, but we also have a lot of unique properties. We have a hospital. We have a energy plant. We have a number of things that have uniqueness to them that you have to bring in expert advice. So part of what you might do is you might utilize some of the money from overlay to bring in that expert advice to how do you value a hospital, and there's different valuation methods. Or the hospitality industry. We have multiple hotels. So those are the types of things that we deal with.
Thank you.
Let me go, Councilor Hines.
I think most of my question was already answered about 4 or 5 different ways, but what I was reaching for was the fact that this overlay carried into next year when there's an anticipation of increased taxes. This would be an opportunity for the taxpayer to not have his taxes increased by using this money to offset the anticipated costs.
Well, no, let me just put it simply. When we have an abatement filed, it becomes a liability of the city.
Potential liability, or?
Well, you have to book it as a liability. Yeah, I mean, you're not going to just ignore it. I mean, if somebody's saying that this is your potential exposure on something, you need to book that worst-case scenario as a liability. So that's what we do. And so we don't ever anticipate that we go to the end of that we're going to lose this. Typically, what we try to do is we try to work with the property owner, and we try to come to some resolve, or sometimes we feel that we're right on with the assessment, and we go all the way. And that's happened before. And sometimes you prevail, and sometimes you don't. But the overlay, though, is there so that because you have tax years that we still have not resolved issues in '04, '05, '06, you want to have that money over here so it does not affect a budget in '09. Because those monies were raised and appropriated in those fiscal years.
So it is the case that money that was put into overlay in '05 is still there in the overlay.
Yeah, we
account.
reserve it, yeah.
Yeah, it's never.
And the state and the state gives you highs and lows. They don't want you to go and have too much money out there in overlay, because we have to go to the Department of Revenue Administration. We go through the MS1, and we go through, and they do the calculation with us, you know, and so, but they also don't want it to go too low either. So you have that kind of that range that you're in.
Let me go Councilor Smith, and then the Assistant Mayor.
Thank you. How are we in what we do prevail in and settle to how many we lose? I mean,
I don't want to get into all
I know
that.
our assessor does a great job, but I guess, let me say it this way. What is our current exposure, and how much do we have in the funds?
At this point, you can't really answer that directly, because there are abatements that are filed, and I think it was March 1st was the deadline for the abatements filed, so a lot of them haven't even been looked at yet, so to know the total exposure at this point wouldn't be.
We'll be inaccurate. No, we can get you that in the future.
But there are abatements that are either denied or finished, and we do refund any taxes. But it's not really until the end of the fiscal year when we actually have an accurate number for potential liability.
Yeah, just simply, I see it, and maybe it's an occupational hazard, but I think Councilor Dwyer might have mentioned it. It's a risk pool. And if you have risk as to how those funds are going to be paid out or not, you have to have the money there. The question is, the follow-up question is, I think I understand it. I understand why it's there. I understand why you can't rate it as a money-hungry city council trying to avoid cutting operating. But is there does that impact our bond rating? Is that a measure of our health?
It would only impact our bond rating if we didn't have any overlay and we had a judgment against us and we had to go out and bond to repay a company for overtaxing them.
But it's a hedge against that, effectively.
Well, that's the money you've set aside. Maybe let me go back. In other states where I've worked, you would not budget 100% of collection of taxes. You might. There's other ways they do it in other states. For example, I would have probably, if I was in Connecticut, I would have probably taken the tax number, and I would have assumed we were going to collect 97% of our taxes. So for all intents and purposes, that becomes your overlay. I mean, you're not going to, so there has to be some mechanism where somebody appeals and you have some additional revenue coming in that covers that particular year.
Well, I think that was valuable, and I'm sure that everybody was here tonight for precisely that set of reasons. But I think it's valuable. So, with that said, we're still talking about non-operating, and I don't know whether that influenced anybody's thoughts, or if you want to move on to some of the items dealing with capital outlay.
That's what I wanted to do.
Oh, that's right, Counselor. Yes, please.
Yeah, I see a walkway and dock and building for Prescott Park for $14,000. I don't see why we couldn't put that out 2 or 3 years. maybe even longer. It's about time they started paying for themselves.
Well,
Since they charge people
this is on the
for it.
last page, and I don't believe we numbered those, so
It's a,
it's $14,000. Let me just explain what that's all about, if I might, Your Honor.
Just to help us out, because I'm still looking for it, about how, okay.
It's
about
about-
a
it's
quarter
the
of the
eighth
way
one
down.
down.
Yeah, okay, thanks.
No, yeah, we have this page right here that they're dealing off of. So it's about the seventh down, I believe. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, eighth down. Okay? It's the walkway, dock, and building lighting, Prescott Park, and Fort Tree Island. This is the first year you're going to be seeing things come in from Prescott Park. We, just like we look at the trade port for improvements to the roadways or whatever out of the trade port, no matter, even though there's a trust in place, there is also, this is also our property. We own the infrastructure out there. We own the park. It's the city, Fort Tree Island is the city of Portsmouth.
Yeah, I know that.
And Prescott Park is the city of Portsmouth. We own the docks. Now, they operate, and Mike Werhurst does a great job in operating the park for limited amount of funds. I mean, he does a real good job. So what they said is they have not had to come to us for any operating expenses ever, but we did start talking about looking at our infrastructure out there, because ultimately the city's going to be responsible for that. So, I mean, yeah, you could take it out, but someday you're going to have to, like, for example, the docks that we did, we worked on those, and
my question is that they charge people to go into that park, and they build a lot of money up in the summertime. Why can't they pay for that?
well, let me just explain that, first of all, and don't shoot the messenger now, Counselor. The fact is that they're donations. They cannot charge, again, don't shoot the messenger.
Yeah, I know.
So I'm just explaining a fact, that they ask for donations. Donations go towards the operation of the Prescott Park Arts Festival. None of that money goes to Mike Werhurst to maintain the park.
Okay? All right, we'll try another one. Land acquisition, we have $100,000 in there. We're going to take out 25. Why can't we do 50,000?
Well, land acquisition, Laura, there's 100,000 available. Let me go through the columns, okay? So everybody, there's available from prior year. Now, let me just speak to that for 1 second, if I might, Your Honor. In the capital, you are allowed to carry over, unlike the general fund, in capital, you are allowed to carry over for a number of years money for those projects so that you can accumulate money and run those projects from fiscal year to fiscal year. So that column, the available from prior year, is money that's been set aside that we've been saving up for potentially when we have the opportunity to purchase property in the city. So, for example, there is $100,000 that's already there from prior year. So we felt that we could zero out the $25,000 that we proposed for appropriating this year, where that means there's zero left all the way to your right for any appropriation from this year's budget.
Right, but in that land budget, there's $100,000. Can't we take $50,000 from
You
that?
could do it if you take it, so the way you would have to do this is you would have to probably, well, it's already been appropriated by a prior council, so you probably couldn't take it until that's extinguished for that money. So what we did is you could zero it out. We zeroed it out there, $25,000, and there's nothing appropriated for this fiscal year for the budget.
So anything that was appropriated in past years can't be touched.
It can't be touched this year, no.
Okay. I'm going to go down through about 5 items in capital improvement, and I'm going to give my reasons why, and I hope I'm not interrupted until after I finish. And I'll give my reasons why. First of all...
Why for what, though, so we know if we're talking
Yeah.
for or against?
No,
just so
all right, I'll explain thoroughly. First of all, we're going to talk about the
Before you go on,
Pierce Island Master Plan.
why don't we do this? Why doesn't everybody take, 1 second and go down the list and number them 1 through whatever?
I've
So
got them all
let's-
numbered.
let's
The first
number
one
'em.
I'll be talking about.
Right, I know you have yours numbered, but the rest of the council
Okay, all
will
right.
number theirs,
All right.
okay?
Oh, I see. No, I see.
Okay. Everybody have 37 items?
Yep.
Yep.
Okay.
Counselor?
Okay, number 13, implementing of the Pierce Island Master Plan. And you heard our chairman talk last night about how he'd like to keep that money in and continue with the master plan. We're on the third phase. You've got to admit, Pierce Island is a jewel, and I'd like to keep that in and replace it with the stump dump figure, which we haven't got in.
What number are you talking about, Counselor?
The stump dump would be number 17.
Yeah, I'm just asking for everybody else's benefit.
I mean, we're still keeping some money in the stump dump. The stump dump goes back probably 10 or 15 years. We've had that item in capital.
And we've always cut it.
I know.
Every year we
We're gonna
cut it.
again. We're cutting it?
Okay.
Yeah, okay.
All right.
That's the second item. My third item is citywide traffic
What
signaling.
number, Counselor?
Number 24. That's what I got. Citywide traffic signaling inventory. I figure that.
That's
25, I think you
All right,
misnumbered them,
25, I'm
Counselor.
sorry, okay.
26.
I'm close.
26.
Oh, boy, oh, boy. Here we go. Could be trouble. Citywide traffic signal inventory, I'd like to see that cut more, if we possibly could. I think there's grants out there if we need more money towards that project as the year goes on. That's my reason. Sagamore Avenue, which is, 27? Sagamore Avenue and Sagamore Creek Bridge replacement.
That's 29.
29, okay. Now, from what I hear from the state, there's been a hold put on updating Sagamore Bridge and Pine Tree Bridge, which is down by Odeon's Point.
You've got
Not
the
too
wrong
many-
bridge, Counselor.
Really?
Yes. You know where the Golden Egg is?
Yes, that's Sagamore Bridge.
That's the
And
bridge.
the other one is Pine Tree Bridge, which is down by Odeon's Point, the only wooden decked bridge
Right.
there is. And both of those been put on hold, from what I hear.
I think he's talking, the other bridge that's being put on hold is the one going on over Newcastle Avenue.
Newcastle what?
Why don't you come up to the microphone, David?
Newcastle Avenue?
The one
Yeah.
on Newcastle.
The ones on Newcastle Avenue, Counselor.
Those
The
two
one at
bridges?
Sagamore Bridge is not being put on hold. If you
Okay.
take the money out, we'll lose 80% funding.
So which bridge is, there's two bridges going across Newcastle.
Yeah, the two that the state is talking about holding back are the Pine Bridge, which is, I don't want to be near Odeon Point, and the other one is on Newcastle Ave from Shapley Island, the first bridge off of
The
that.
first bridge. All right. Okay, I was mistaken.
Okay.
All right.
So this one is not there.
Track, I've got number about 32 or 33, traffic claiming
Modeling.
upgrade Ocean Road.
Oh, which one are you talking about now?
Yep,
Ocean Road.
Ocean Road. Now,
35.
34, the
34, all
traffic
right, all
calming
right.
upgrades, Ocean
okay.
Road.
Now, there's still a suit going on in reference to pocket development that hasn't been settled yet. They're in the highest court within the state, and I think we ought to put a hold on any expenditure out there on Ocean Road and 33.
Okay.
Until after.
Let me just explain. We have 66% of state funding that's coming that we've got to utilize. I mean, if you recall, we went to the state DOT commissioner and asked them to use state funds, and I think Representative Pantelakis, serving as in her capacity, helped us out a little bit on that. And we have now that money, 66% state money sitting out there. This is the match. If you want to abandon the Ocean Road traffic calming project, we can do that.
Until the settlement is made in reference to pocket development out there off 33.
That had nothing to do with packet
Well,
development.
There
But
was some money allocated for 33 and Ocean Road
But
redesign.
if we get that money,
Yeah.
then you could probably reduce. But the thing is, that we need this money to do this work.
We're gonna-
If you want to give, this project is
We're
it's
gonna-
probably another, I mean, I have no problem with it, just as long as the council understands, if you take this out, right, and the state comes to us and say, you've got to start this work, and you have to spend the 66% funding, I'll come back to you and ask for the money.
They'll demand us to start that before the settlement is.
Doesn't this relate to the truck traffic?
Yes.
Yes.
And the neighborhood was here
This
in
came out of a
numbers.
whole traffic study. that
Board of
we did.
Adjustment in Greenland has already
This has
turned
nothing to
down
do
the
with that.
exit coming out of.
Even
The
if
truck
that
stop.
wasn't there, that truck traffic, if you ever have to use that road, is really terrible.
This came out of a.
I tried it.
This came out of
I
a.
got a call about this tonight
Yeah.
from Ocean Road.
That's right.
And they have a lot of problems there with the trucks
I know
and
they do.
speeding, and they need something done.
They've been before the BOA to get a new exit from the truck stop onto 33,
But
and
that's
they
in
were
Greenland.
refused.
Waiting.
We're talking about Ocean Road that's in Portsmouth.
Remember when we wrote the letter to
Yes, I know.
them and asking her, it's just Ocean Road, it's the whole of Ocean Road. It isn't any on this end.
No, it isn't. It's
Yes,
Ocean Road and
we don't
33.
own anything on
know.
this end, from the bridge.
Counselor, I think those were the 5 items, correct?
That's right.
Let me ask you this now, just to kind of formalize it and perhaps move it along at the same time. Any or all those items that you would like to move to either add or subtract as the case may be?
What about Pierce Island?
Well, make the motion and,
Pierce Island here is up there.
if you want to make a motion to add that,
I wouldn't dare to.
what was that?
You can fool me once, you don't fool me twice.
I'll make the motion
Thank you.
to add it.
Second.
All right, there we go. It's the auction field, but hopefully not the result in terms of the spirit of
We're
auctions.
adding this.
To
Restore,
to keep it.
Keep the Pierce Island, but drop the stump dump.
well,
That
that would
wasn't
be
my
two
motion.
We aren't
separate
there
motions.
yet.
Yeah. So, we've got a motion to put the 25,000 back in, correct? Okay, I've got the second. Comment? You've heard Councilor Whitehouse. Any other comment on that?
I'd like to have him tell me where he's going to make that up, because although Pierce
We're gonna-
Island is a jewel and it's very important, we still have the rest of the city to work,
That's
to
right.
be
Well, if you
concerned
want to
about.
stop Phase 3, which is the last phase of the master plan, that's all well and good with me. But the Rec Board and the Pierce Island Study Committee has recommended that this 25,000 stay in. I'm just the messenger, I'm sorry.
We understand that, but they're not here tonight. Now, they don't have a vote.
Okay, Councilor Dwyer.
I made the motion in the spirit, not that we are trying, I'm not, trying to cut all, I'm not accepting option A. I'm starting with option A. That's what I thought we were doing. So that's why I don't feel obligated to say if I want to keep something, that I have to take something away. In fact, I personally don't believe we should cut as much from capital as we have, which means that I don't feel we need to get to this bottom line that option A represents. And I just say that for clarity, because I don't think, we haven't as a council yet accepted that option A is where we are. It's our talking platform. So in that spirit, I certainly stand behind Pierce Island. I thought the reasons given by Hugh Jenks last night were very solid in terms of the kinds of things that the Pierce Island Committee would recommend be done with that money, and they meet multiple goals of the city. I thought that's what was compelling about the presentation. They address some of the dog issues, they address traffic issues. So I thought it was a well-reasoned argument, and that's why I make that.
Other comments about the restoration of the 25,000 involving Pierce Island?
It seemed to me that the only thing that he was interested in, really interested this year in, were signage.
Signage.
So that should not take $25,000 to do, because they don't want the island to be overrun with signs. They want just signs that explain that where the boat launch is and the dogs on leash in a certain area and off a leash in another area. So,
Let me ask you a quick question then related to that. The 25,000 figure, well, let me back it up. Counselor, did you want to make a motion to amend the 25,000 figure?
well, I don't know what the signs will cost, and I don't, I won't make any motion. No.
Okay. Counselor Whitehouse and then Counselor Smith.
Just a brief comment. The last phase of Phase 3 is the hot topping of the parking area by the boat ramp and striping it, so the trailers and trucks can park in an orderly fashion. It's helter-skelter now, and it's causing some serious problems.
So you're
That's-
saying that the
Some of that
25,000.
money will be used for that purpose.
And let me just say that if that stays in, which is fine, don't expect, it may take a lot longer than you expect, because we do have to go to DES with that, because we're so close to the water. And we probably won't accomplish it with $25,000, because
Sure.
we're going to need to do some drainage and other things to protect the waterways from, potential loss of fluids from cars and things of that
Is it
sort.
fair to say then that this $25,000 would work towards various
Yeah, if you-
goals, but is not specifically earmarked to the completed?
Let me put it this way, that is not enough money to do what Councilor Whitehouse has just.
We have money earmarked already, left over from the
Oh, I think, let me see.
finger pier and the boat.
$10, I think,
$10
yeah.
bucks.
Well, it's something.
But you have to remember, now,
To
we
me,
have
that's
to
a lot.
remember that we've leveraged probably close to $800,000 to $1 million out there in grants. We've really tapped out a lot of grants in there. No, what I'm saying, Counselor, it's not and again, if it stays in, that's fine, but don't expect it to be done for $25,000. And this is not because of, it's because we're going to have to go through a permitting process with DES, and appropriately so because of its location.
Okay, Counselor Smith and then the Assistant Mayor.
Thank you, Your Honor. Speaking to this, when Hugh spoke last night, the notes that I made to myself was to reinstate it by $12,500 and take the stump dump down by $12,500, basically splitting the two projects so that we could do the signage portion if possible that he was requesting, but at least we're still putting some monies in for the stump dump to at least we start getting some money set aside, because this has been a project that has been sitting on the CIP. I mean, I did CIPs for 10 years, and it was something we've been pushing around. So I'd like to start seeing some money put aside for it. So I don't know if that's want to be as a friendly amendment to try to split the two.
Well, let's just get some operational things down here.
Sure.
You're not making motions tonight. They all be by consensus.
Yeah, I mean consensus.
Over formalized that, that's right.
So
Yeah.
that's the way I would like to see it to go, so that we can at least get some money for the master plan for Pierce Island and start the funding for the stump dump.
Okay, Assistant Mayor and then Counselor Dwyer.
I know the devil's always in the details, and we need to have the discussion, and we need to go item by item, and I think it's important. But it is an $80 million budget, and, I think yes, if you watch the pennies, the dollars will take care of themselves, but sometimes you got to look at the big picture, and I would just like to ask the city manager, because frankly, I think he understands the drill-down menu on a lot of these projects better than all of us, and I'm just curious, if you were going to find $25,000 there, and we were going to do something for Pierce Island, where might we find it?
You mean to replace the full $25,000?
Yeah, if we're, and I know Councilor Dwyer's not talking about replacing it, but just for the sake of family harmony, is there?
I'd probably take down on the area of traffic signal number 25.
Because why?
Well, because we'll be putting it out, and we could probably do it in phases. Also, depending on, you're looking at a lot of projects, and so potentially you might have some money left over from those projects too. So, depending on how they go out to bid and everything, and then we can reallocate the money to that location. I prefer not to. I mean, I've given you basically where I think you ought to take the money from. If I had to take it, I'd take it from there and then hope that we come in better on a lot of our bids and things of that sort and see if we could make it up. We brought down contingency substantially to zero. So capital contingency is down, but I do have some prior capital contingency that's available that I might, if we're short, make up. Not a lot, but there's some, because you have to have that wiggle room when you're going out to bid, so you put in this estimate. So yeah, you could leave the $25,000 there, you could take down the $25,000 from the the traffic signal evaluation replacement citywide, if you wanted to do that.
And something the assistant mayor said that I just want to keep in mind is, as we're talking about 10 or 15 or 25, and not that it's nothing, but we're talking about, we haven't gotten to the 4 departments yet, which are requesting in the neighborhood of mid-60s in the millions. So let's not get lost here in the middle of the forest, that there's some bigger discussions that maybe we have or we don't have tonight, but let's not get stuck on the 10,000 moving from one line item to another, as the city manager was alluding to as well. Councilor Dwyer and then Councilor Smith.
Well, then in that spirit, and since I kind of started this, I think maybe we ought to be talking about how, as a group, we feel about the overall reduction in capital outlay, and start with that package rather than starting piece by piece, and then we can do that. Because if nobody else is interested in keeping most of the capital outlay, at least it doesn't make sense for me then to argue piece by piece. So maybe we should get more of a sense of the group on, are we generally agreed that we're trying to reduce the capital outlay piece or not?
Maybe it'd be helpful if I just went down our proposed reductions and explain some of the reasonings why we did that. And so that you understand a little bit about why we.
Right. I mean, I think I can infer a lot of it. I think it's good to do that, but I also think it's good to get the sense of the council if generally people are trying to agree that they would like to get rid of that.
And that's it, kind of cut to the chase in that regard. I think you're right on. And Councilor Smith, let me take it from that approach. And Councilor Smith.
Thank you. Sure. No, I do agree with the 270 reduction. As a matter of fact, I'd like to see an additional one. The Plains Avenue Beverly Hill Road of the 150,000 to split.
What number are you talking about?
Sorry, the number I have it is 28, and to do that 75,000 in 08 and 75,000 in 09, since it is I see it coming out as a general fund project. The idea of it is, since it comes, if we did it at the end of the construction season, you can do one half one year and do one half the other year, is how we had done some of our cuts last year.
Can I speak to this?
Yep.
Because this one is tied to a major project. This is tied to the railroad bridge construction project. And that's coming up this year. So I don't know, David, did you want to speak to that? One thing, while he's coming up to the microphone, one thing I tried not to touch were those things that would leverage state and federal money.
Right, I agree.
And also would be what we try to do sometimes is you might see it's coming out of general fund, but we don't want to have mobilization costs twice. So we try to make improvements in those areas where we're getting federal and state funding. If we have local dollars that we have to expend for a certain section, like this particular road, Plains and Beverly Hill Road, that money would be made available for that project. David?
Yeah, and I think what's important to note is this was originally an 80-20 project, but then we also pick up money from the railroad when we agreed to repair that bridge as part of this project. So, or the state threw in the 10% for them. So this is a very small portion of our money. And as we started looking at this whole corridor, the Plains ball field and that whole intersection, which has been brought up numerous times as an area of concern, we really wanted to get that addressed at the same time so it would flow seamlessly with the rest of the project. So this is really to take care of that end of the project, actually.
Oh, and I definitely agree. From sitting on traffic and safety, this is an area that definitely needs some work. I'm just wondering that from the time schedule of when the construction is actually happening. I know last year when we did this, we were able to do a 50-50 because the way the fiscal budget hits, and you can incur some of those expenses in 08 and pay the rest of them in 09.
But I don't think we can sign contracts unless we have the money available at the time. Isn't that correct?
Yes. I mean, the problem is, Counselor, is this project's going to happen this year. We're going to get started in this next fiscal year on this project. So we have to enter into construction contracts with people. We have to have the money available. I mean,
this would be an example, would it not, of a project where, for better or worse, the funding it comes out in front, and that some of the activity may occur after the end of the
Right.
fiscal year, but the money, you have to have the money to start the
And the
project.
fact is that next fiscal year is not going to get any easier.
No, I
I
know.
mean, so, and then we're going to be up against the wall on it, because now you're going to have to put it in, because I would think the timing is the issue. I would hope that you have some confidence in us. I mean, we've spent months working on these projects, looking at the timing of these projects, to start moving. My main concern, when I talked to the staff about these reductions, what I tried to do is not affect any project that's going to be in the hopper. And that's been pretty successful in the past. So rather than me having to come back to you and say, geez, I need $150,000 because that project's moving up quicker, and then we need to take it either from contingency or we need to have some fund balance, we tried to leave those projects alone in here. I went through and took projects that would not have any immediate effect on the operations of the city or our infrastructure improvements. Anything you take out of here typically will have to be replaced in another year out into the future.
It wasn't a lack of confidence I had in you.
No.
It was, last year, I know we did a couple where we were able to move it right to the end and pay some this year and pay some
And that,
year after.
and that happened because DOT moved some of their projects. We get that information sometimes, and I believe this project, though, this railroad project, the Route 33 project, this is the first project that I've been here that they're pushing us.
Absolutely, yeah.
Because of the need, it's a red line bridge, and they need to get this thing going. And we've been talking about this bridge probably for, 5 years?
At least, yeah.
5 years,
No, I
so.
don't want to change the time schedule, because I know it's an important project out there, but I was just trying to come up with another creative way of trying to do some savings.
Let me go back, because I think Councilor Dwyer suggested it, and I want to simplify this, because we're going to go all night and save, $8,000 there or something. There's $270,000 that is specified. I think Councilor Whitehouse named an item, for example, that's part of that you don't agree with, for example, the Pierce Island money. Are there items in the 270, and you said, Councilor
Already
Smith,
motion
that
on the
you're
floor.
comfortable with that the 270, and there may be others, but you were comfortable with that. Who here is comfortable with the 270 as it stands? You may want additional, but agree that anything would involve that 270. Okay, I see it, 4 folks. So obviously, some of you think that maybe there's an item that doesn't belong.
This is all straw.
I just want to get an idea.
Straw.
Basically, what I'm trying to get out of folks is, if you think that something, part of this 270 should not be taken away, let's hear about it. Let me go to Councilor Reynolds.
Well, I agree with Councilor Whitehouse. I think that we should follow through and keep the money in the Pierce Island, for the Pierce Island Master Plan project completion of that. That place has only gotten more popular with the improvements that we've made. It's been sort of high profile, the problems we've had there, and I think the chairman made a good case last night for following through with that little amount of money to in a very public part of our city, that we should follow through and spend that money this year. I also think that we should not. I would not support including in the cuts from capital here the $50,000 for traffic calming and upgrades. I think, if you talk to people, this is the number one. One of citizens' main concerns in our city is traffic and safety issues around speed and traffic patterns and safety of pedestrians, et cetera. And spending capital to do what we can to solve those problems is a lot less expensive than police patrol, to try and catch people, or physical presence to try to keep that stuff down. So those are the 2 items there that I wouldn't support taking out.
Right. Other items that have not been mentioned. Assistant Mayor.
I think we're in a position to move on. If we could say, keep the 25 in for Pierce Island. The city manager, I think, suggested, I don't know if I got it right or not, but perhaps it was item 25. Take 25,000 out of that. Out of traffic signal evaluation replacement citywide. Is that the one you mentioned?
Right.
And let's move on.
Are there any other items in this 270 that you say, no, I would not like to see this reduced? Councilor.
There isn't anything more there. I just would, we can sit here all night nickel and dime this budget, but we all know the fact of the matter is the city manager's given us two good options. One of them affects the operating budgets of the departments. I don't want to see that. But, the fact of the matter is that we can only do so much without layoffs. And the city in Portsmouth does not want us to cut any personnel. So we need to take the time and just go to one of these options and take it. Because you can take $25 off, $25,000 on one place and put it back someplace else. It's just nickel and diamond, and we're not doing anything. We're not accomplishing anything. And I just think that, if we want to really cut this budget down, the only way you're going to do it is layoffs, and we don't want to do that.
Councilor Grosso, Assistant Mayor.
Thank you, Your Honor. I look upon our city manager as the professional here, and he has the overview of the whole city and all the departments. So I would like to go along with his suggestions, but I am willing to take another suggestion of his. As the assistant mayor said, take $25,000 out of number 25 and take that out. That would not delete the project. You still have $75,000 to work with for the traffic calming, and then in doing that, we would put Pierce Island back. Take that off the list. And I think this is a very good list, and I have to respect John for doing his job. This is what we pay him for. It's not up to the city council to micromanage, but to take a overview of the entire city. And it's very hard for us to do that because he knows what projects are in the hopper, what has grant money and matching funds coming up, and what will be affected most. So I put my trust in his knowledge and would go along with option A with that swap.
Okay, Assistant Mayor?
I know you're talking about option A as a baseline, and maybe I can articulate this well enough to just say this. If we're talking about finding $100,000 for operating, understanding Councilor Penelakis's valid concerns, the question I would have is, we have seen in this budget presentation from all departments significant creativity in how they manage their budgets. So if we said this, and I don't know who answers the question, but if we could say, looking at B and not A, and say $100,000 out of $64,554, and say, is it 64 million? Yeah, I think it is. Can we find $100,000? And we kind of had this discussion last year when we did this, and we were all getting new to the process, and we talked about 20,000 in one department and 40,000 in another. I do believe are receiving one supplemental request back at this time, but I think that's all we're receiving. I respect the department heads and the city manager enough to say, I'll bet they can find 100,000 without laying people off. And if people can make those kinds of representations to us, I'd be happy to entertain them. And maybe that gets us to the discussion of A or B, and on we go.
And I just want to, let's just clean off, because I think there are four things that I've heard on the table. I just want to knock them in or knock them out, because they're kind of just floating around, as Councilor Penelakis said. There were four things I heard. And I would urge you to think of the policy first. Is this something that is in that you really think shouldn't be? Is this something that is out that you think should really be in? Think of it in that sense. Pierce Island, putting the 25 back in. The stump dump was mentioned. Taking that 25 out. I think the signal evaluation, if I understood that right, going from 100 down to 75 was something that was suggested. Do I have that correct? And then the traffic calming upgrades, Councilor Reynolds mentioned, would be an addition back in of 50,000. Those are the four items that at the end of the day I've soaked in.
Your Honor, might I speak? I didn't have an opportunity to speak to Councilor Reynolds' discussion on that. The one thing I'd have to say, Councilor, this is money that will be leveraged with some of the state money as well. So it's not like all the money's going away. It is not, for the traffic calming for Ocean Road, we do have some funds available that will be coming in from the state to help out. And we believe that there is some prior year money that we can probably use from other construction projects to get us to where we need to be. It's again timing to get this project underway, as I think Councilor Smith has talked about. So I guess that I'm comfortable with the way it is, and you're not going to get harmed by it in terms of your traffic calming on Ocean Road.
Okay.
I mean, there's a lot of work that's been put into this, and it isn't like this is going to be a general citywide like, for example, I would
Okay.
hesitate, if you notice, for the traffic calming in help me out, Elwyn Road, 32. If you notice that, Counselor, number 32, we didn't touch that.
All right, because
Okay,
that's,
because that's standing alone. That $25,000 is going to be the money used to do some of the traffic calming in that neighborhood. Whereas we're probably leveraging somewheres about, what is it, Steve, on Ocean Road? How much? 2/3 from the state, so.
okay. So we
That-
had 150 budgeted, you're proposing just to knock it down by 50.
Right.
There's still 100 of ours, plus a lot of state money.
And then hopefully,
Okay.
and I think Councilor Whitehouse spoke to this, but it's not money that's in the bank. It's the money that we negotiated with Packard Development. But again, he's correct. It is going through litigation. So I don't want to count on all that money.
Okay, thank you for that.
Counselor, with that said, would you feel comfortable?
Yes, I will. That's, take that one away.
So I'm back down to 3.
We're keeping that
One's,
in.
one's an add, 2 or subtract, all are at 25,000 each. Again, think of the policy, because we're dealing with really very small amounts of money in the big picture if you feel very strongly, one way or the other. Councilor Dwyer.
I'm not worried about micromanaging, and I'm not worried about this money, but I just want to put this idea on the table, because the stump dump obviously precedes me by decades. When we go to deal with the middle school and the fields, whatever we do with that, might that not be a part of the bonding to simply redo that field? Isn't that a playing field? Might that not be folded into a larger project and just get it done?
Well, the one thing that we're going to get started, to be honest with you, we're going to take and, as we get rid of the gun club, we're going to clean up that. Once we clean that up, we're going to start by putting in waste, what's the material that, the material from construction projects to fill that area. And then we're going to grade it and do all that. And we'll probably use this money to lease heavy equipment, Steve? Yeah. So we're kind of doing it in-house where we have all these construction projects, so you have all this gravel and we're going to put in there, we're going to grade it out, let it settle out a little bit, and so we're going to kind of do it in-house.
Okay.
And then at the end of the day, when we have it all nice and level, we'll then seed it or whatever we want to do with it. And
But in the long run, the goal is for it to become part of the playing field.
part of the park system,
Park
not
system.
the schools' playing field. Now, the schools can use them, like they use Plow Field for softball, for women's softball, for the high school. So, what we're trying to do with this 25,000, let me put it this way: if you cut the 25,000, we'll try to work within the budget. We'll try to, we'll rent the heavy equipment where needed. We'll bring in fill. I think we could probably pull that off, and then we'll slowly put the key item. The reason the stump dump didn't go forward any quicker was, one, was we didn't budget for it, but two, we had to deal with the gun club issue, and that's done. So that's done. So now we can move forward on it. So as materials come in, we'll just maybe grade it out, and at some point, we're going to have a nice field out there.
Yeah, I've seen the heavy equipment going in there. Yeah.
Let's try to keep these 3 items. Councilor Smith.
No, I have no problem with leaving the stump dump in and not subtracting out. The reason I brought it up before was just to maybe split the 2 in half between Pierce Island and stump dump. But if you want to leave it in, and that's fine, and take the 25 out for the singularization to make up for the Pierce Island, I'm very comfortable with that. Let's take the 270 and let's go on to the next subject.
Okay, I'm going to do a little straw vote here then, unless somebody's got, we've heard a lot about all of us, so. There's one add item, that would be adding the 25,000 back involving Pierce Island. Who here would be in favor of adding that back? 3, 4, 5, 6, 7.
There's a
Okay,
motion.
very good.
Was
So
it a
that would
motion?
be
No,
25
we
that
can't do
would add
motions,
in.
we're in a work session.
Sure, I know.
Okay, now, you
Sure.
got 2 here, you could, in theory, be for subtracting both, or 1 or neither, that's okay. The stump dump, who here would be in favor, there's currently 25 in, who would be in favor of taking the 25 out? Nobody, okay? Last one, 25 grand signal evaluation, taking what is now 100, correct, down to 75. Who would be in favor of doing that? Okay, so basically it's
Same thing.
neutral, 25 up, 25 down. Okay.
But we saved Pierce Island.
I'm gonna tell you.
All right. And is
We're all
there any-
relieved.
Is there anything else,
From CIP?
from anything else from CSP, or for that matter, non-operating? It's supposed to be on non-operating. Okay, you're ready.
Yes.
Oh, yes, there is.
Yeah.
Okay, yes, Counselor.
Thank you, Your Honor. Mine is going back to the overlay, and that is, I'd like to see a reduction of that. I know we have, as the city manager has already spoke to it, it was $800,000 last year, gone up to $1 million this year. As it's important, I do think that we do have funds in there. I'd like to maybe just take 100,000 instead of going, I was originally going to say down to 800,000, but just take it down to 900,000, take $100,000 from that.
So, go
put it
overlay, which is currently 1
1
million,
million, bring it down to
suggesting
900,000.
900,000.
Historically, this is what happens sometimes when you agree to let that come down, because in prior years, it was either between 1.2 million and $1 million. I think at one point it was up to about 1.2 million. So we've gradually taken that down, you know. Again, it's, you know, pay me now or pay me later type of thing. It's going to be, you know, it depends on how it all shakes out at the end, how much we're going to have to pay people back. I mean, you can either add it to this budget or to future budgets.
I have confidence in our city assessor and our legal staff that we'll be able to we won't have to secure all of those monies. I know there's quite a bit that is saved already, so I'd be comfortable with taking 100,000 from that.
Okay, let's have a little conversation about that one. Counselor Reynolds.
Well, I just wondered if the manager could explain whether it's a percentage basis or you know, past batting average type of figure over a long period of time, or, you know, in terms of whether you budget it at 1.2 or you've been comfortable this year budgeting it at $1 million. On what basis might we be comfortable reducing it another 100 or not? I don't really understand.
I'll let since the finance director has to deal with the DRA, I'll let her explain it.
We had, like I said before, we have some liability out there from prior year. Almost $2 million in prior year potential liability. That some of that could go away, some of that might not go away. Right now, like I said, we have over 268 abatements that were filed. Some have been closed, and some we still don't even know what the potential liability is, because when someone files an abatement, and these are large commercial properties, and we may not even be able to determine what the potential liability is because they don't supply us with a value of what they think. So we may have to go out and we may have to get an appraisal done on the property, and so that may take some time. And then, we don't have an exact number. I personally don't feel comfortable reducing that liability. I know when I go to DRA in October, just at the tax rate, they, knowing that we went through a revaluation, they're going to want to make sure that we have enough in that account. So going in with $1 million is, I think, an adequate number.
How much do we currently have in the account?
We have a couple $1 million in that account.
We have liabilities that are out
It's
there.
liabilities.
You have to remember, this isn't just for one fiscal year. This
Right.
is how, those liabilities are incurred in those prior years where if you don't put the money aside, then future people will be paying for past liabilities.
Exactly.
And I can appreciate that. I'm just asking for $100,000 to be cut back, just 10% of
I'm
it,
glad.
just to again, it's non-operating, and I have a lot of confidence in our assessor, that we will prevail.
And we're so happy these are televised and recorded.
Let me go Councilor Dwyer and the Assistant Mayor.
Well, that's sort of the nature of my comment. I think the explanations tonight have been really helpful, but clearly, in order to be able to make judgments about things like this, the council needs to understand it better and have more information. So I wouldn't be comfortable touching the number tonight based on the things that you have said, but nor do I feel I am in a good position, and it may well be an executive session with council or whatever, just to understand better over time what those liabilities are, because otherwise, just to exercise fiduciary responsibility, to have a better handle on what the cumulative liability is and what the potential is. That's why while I would have agreed with Councilor Smith until you guys started talking tonight and talking about the risk pool, hinting at the amount of liability that's potentially out there, et cetera, I don't feel I'd be in a position to, tonight, make a change to that number, but I would like to, prior to the next year's budget, have a better handle on it.
What we can do, if, we can talk to the mayor about scheduling it, but I would do a non-meeting with our assessor, our city attorney, our finance director. We'll come in, we'll show you what our liabilities are, where our major liabilities are. The one thing you have to understand, under state statute, I don't even tell the assessor basically how to negotiate and settle these if she's going to settle them. She has to do it based on good, solid information, either through an appraisal standards or somebody that we've hired as an expert. So yes, we will show you we can give you a list, and we can do that in non-public because this is a legal issue. And so we can do that, and certainly we'll schedule that.
Okay, Assistant Mayor.
I'll just comment, picking up on what Councilor Dwyer said, I mean, I think we've seen that, I have seen that, I recall seeing that information before. I can't remember in what format it was presented to us during some non-meeting with council. And, it's a classic, we're doing a budget here, and maybe it's a thing of disciplines, but being a lawyer, to me, 1 and 1 is always 3. I don't believe 1 and 1 is 2. That's for accountants. And so, in this particular case, I see it as risk. I know I have respect for their experience and understanding, and it just ain't the same kind of account as paying for the toilet paper. So I am comfortable with the representation. I would love to see the breakdown of the risk assessment and what they have, but I can get there tonight.
And I would just personal comment, I would agree that there's a lot of value to that. Would be a good educational opportunity for myself and probably the whole council. And also, and I know Councilor Smith, you've expressed confidence in the assessor. I think we all share that, and confidence in the finance director too. And until I personally get that further education, when you tell me that the $1 million is the appropriate number, that's good enough for me. Just again, maybe with more education, we can be a more active participant in that way. Councilor Grasso.
Yes, thank you, Your Honor. We just went through and came up with the option A with some variations in there, and I'm very comfortable with that. At this point, I don't see the need to look for another $100,000 that might give us 2 cents on the tax, off on the taxes. I think that we were all very impressed with all the departments as they gave their presentations this year. I was impressed with the school department and the fact that they are going to try to do all-day kindergarten without any added funds, but by substituting with people from layoffs and retirements and such, and that the police and fire and the municipal presented very good budgets that we found very little fault with when they gave their presentations. I would be very happy just to say that I would like to adopt the budget with option A.
Well, let me close the door, though, and even if it ends up the rest of this process is a fraction, if the operating budgets of the 4 departments end up being a fraction of the non-operating, then so be it. But let me close the door on Councilor Smith's discussion. Is there any other comment about that specifically?
Overlay. You two got to talk about overlay.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. That's what you are. You
Yep.
got to think it? Okay.
Did you have a comment about
No,
that?
no, but I
Okay,
want
let's close the door on that.
Fences.
Okay, a comment about,
No, not about
all right, let's
overlay.
close the door on that. Those that would favor the reduction from 1 million to 900,000, straw poll, raise your hand. Okay, 3, and those that would not, I presume. Okay, that doesn't, that fails. Anything else non-operating? Councilor Whitehouse.
Let's talk about contingency. Each year, as far as I can remember back, it's always 400,000. To me, I think that's an incentive for people to get in and get their foot in the door early, to ask for an appropriation from contingency. I like to see contingencies cut in half from 400,000 to 200,000, and therefore be very strict who we allow to draw from contingency as a figure in the next going out year.
Because right now, we're talking 400 down to 300, correct?
No. Yep.
So you would propose
Right now it's
another 100
300.
down
I
to,
want to go to 2,
you want to go from 3 to 2?
yes.
Well,
City manager?
again, it's, contingency is what it is. If we have a bad winter and we have major issues and typically I like to take from contingency one time, non-recurring. I mean, as long as everybody on this council knows, and there may or may not be all of you on this council when whoever's dealing with it's dealing with it, but I have the tape, but that's fine. I have no problem.
We can always move from one account to the
I said,
operating.
I just said I don't have a problem with that.
Okay.
So, I mean, it's
right.
really,
Okay.
It's, are there other comments about that? Councilor Grasso and then the assistant mayor.
Yes, I remember just a few winters ago, when we had to use that contingency to pay for the snow plowing and snow removal, because it was more than doubled what was already budgeted. And if we did not have the contingency, we would have also been in a lot of trouble. Also, I think there was a possibility with what's ever going to happen with the EEE and the West Nile virus, with the liabilities that are, or dangers that will be coming up with that budget, even though it's been increased, we may need more than we have in the books.
That snow removal was a storm of 78.
No, sir.
No.
It was very recently.
no, there was a year that we actually took
I wasn't sitting on this
250,000
council
from
on this.
contingency.
Yeah, and it was very, very expensive. I think that we need that cushion.
Can always move from one account to the other.
Well, let me just speak to that for a second. Sorry, Your Honor, but
No, go ahead.
you have to remember, you have a charter, and you can't move from one account. So if
Within
there's,
non-operating, you can't move from within non-operating?
no, if Public Works has a problem, I can't take that money from another location and put into Public Works. I can take from line item to line item within Public Works.
Anything with under non-operating expensive line account, you can't move within that
No,
area? You can't take from taxes,
No.
anticipated note interest
No.
and move it down to contingency?
no, the charter. I didn't bring one with me, but I could cite it.
Let me go with the assistant mayor, Councilor Penelakos, and then Councilor Hines.
And I hate to talk about option B through the back door, but in the terms of the 100,000 or whatever we're talking about in contingency, I will. It's back to the concept of, is it a surer thing, is it better to have money for risk, which is really what that 400,000 is. Is it better to have money for risk when you can say to your very creative and accomplished department heads, hey, can you all find $100,000 out of 64 million without laying anybody off and out changing any programs? And if people could say yes to that, this discussion ends. So I really don't think the contingency is risk money. It makes me feel uncertain, and I would hate to have to go through the procedure of revoting, and it just seems silly. When this year we really weren't tapped in contingency, and we haven't in the 3 years that I've been on the council very heavily, so.
The one thing I would say is when it's down to the contingency is down to 300,000, which I've recommended, that means it's 0.3% of the entire budget. So when you talk about contingency in an $80 million budget, I mean, again, if everybody recognizes that your only other alternative, if you're short, is that you have to hold 2 public hearings. I mean, you have to hold a public hearing and vote by 2/3 of the council and take it probably, you have a couple options, but I would probably recommend taking it from fund balance. You don't want to send out a supplemental tax bill, obviously. So what you would do is you'd probably take it from fund balance.
Okay, Councilor Pedalacos.
Yes, I disagree with this assistant mayor. I think that they picked this budget about as much as they can. And when somebody in this city is operating at 13% or at 17%, pretty soon we're going to be asking our kids to bring their own toilet paper to school. We don't need that. We're dropping the budget, it's working good, and I have not had one complaint, not one phone call over the budget this year, because the people are getting a good service for their money. And I think to ask even to take $500 out of somebody's budget, it's going for something. They put it in there for a reason. And that we should go with option A and not, they have been very creative. And I think this council would be wrong to ask them to try to take any more out of it.
I want to just finish the non-operating part of the budget here. Is we have a suggestion to move the contingency, which was once 4, is now suggested to be 3. This would bring it down to 2. Is there any comment about that? All right, let's take a straw vote on that. Who would be in favor of reducing the contingency from the 3 to 2? Who would oppose it? All right, let's move on from that. Any other non-operating items? All right, that's it? All right, then in that case, what I'm hearing is that it looks like it did, except we've replaced 25,000 from signal evaluation and effectively put it into Pierce Island. That's really the practical effect. And that's it, correct? All right. From non-operating, that's it. All right. Let's move on then. We got 4 departments. The first, I'll just take them in the order that they appear, is municipal.
Why can't we take a vote on one or the other and get rid of whatever we're going to do?
Well, what that would imply is that that you're comfortable. Well, I guess we would start. It seemed like. Well, go over here. If you want to use A as a discussion point, as a few of you have suggested, if that's how you feel, then obviously, is there anybody that is not comfortable with A as a baseline? In other words, that you think that any or all of those 4 operating budgets should be higher than what option A would suggest? Okay. Is there anybody, I'm just going to take it the other extreme, at least, and extreme is a really relative term when you're looking at an $80 million budget. Option B, is there anybody here who thinks that it should be lower, that is, that the total increase, how do I put this, among the 4 operating budgets, does anybody think that any of those 4, or all of them, should be lower than what option B suggests?
Yes.
Okay? This may not be, okay, let's go with that then.
What I like to do, I like to talk about option B. And the reason why I'm suggesting my move. First of all, let's look ahead to the future. We've got bonding for the fire station coming up. We've got the sewer treatment plant updating, large bond issue. The water treatment plant update. We've got the middle school will be bonding. If something has to be done to the middle school, either junior high or Johnson's. We've got the statewide property tax next year. We don't know what's going to happen next year out. I'm talking about the year 2009. You know, this is the year to hold the line and reduce the tax rate as much as possible. Give the taxpayers a break. So that's why I've looked at option B, and I'm ready to make a recommendation to even cut further. I'd like to take a 1% from each department under option B. In other words, under municipal, the amended proposed budget that the city manager has come up with, the $15,265,956, 1% off that, 1% off police, which is $352,488, 1% off the fire department, which is $6,567, and 1% off the school, which is $34,326,773.
So
I'd like
just
to
to-
take 1% off all those.
Let me just restate it to be sure I'm clear.
Yep.
So I'm going to use the school as an example.
Yep.
So the amended proposed budget, that is, this is with option A
Yep.
included.
No, I'm talking
B.
about
Oh,
option
no,
B.
but I'm saying option, that
B.
amended
Already.
proposed
Option
budget
B.
reflects option A soaked into it already.
Yep.
Okay.
That's right.
So just a ballpark, a 1% reduction would be, from the school, for example, would be another $343,000.
$267, that's right.
And from fire would be 65,000.
65,000,
Police would be 83.5
that's right.
thousand, that is, and municipal would be, what's that, 152,000.
To a total of about 579,450, which
Okay.
would be about 3 cents on the tax rate,
So,
2.5, 3 cents. And
okay.
my reasoning is because in the future, I think we're going to be bonded, we're going to have some expenses, we're going to have some mandates by this council for updating the, like I stated before, the sewage treatment plant, the water treatment plant, the middle school, the statewide property tax issue is going to come back and haunt us. I predict that 2009 will be a donor town again. So, I think we should lower the tax rate. What?
You are wrong.
Yeah, I am. Thank you very much.
Well,
Anyway.
On a calculation basis, I'm not talking about the merits of the issue, the council, if I might, that'd be a 17.5 cent reduction.
right, that's right. Councilor Hines.
17.5 cents about.
I'm sitting here looking at option A since we started about an hour and something ago, and the more I hear about changes, the more bewildering it gets. I think we have a well-planned, workable option, an option A. I think that the reduction in the taxes, as they have been, are based on solid grounds. They do not avoid or ignore the impact of matching grants and everything that goes with this particular option. It's well considered and well studied, and it took a lot of time to get it down here where it is. And tonight, in an hour and some odd time, we're going to try to scramble it. I really am bewildered by the options that have been offered that have not got a solid basis for producing any benefit for the taxpayer. So I would support option A as it is.
Okay, let me go up the aisle here. Assistant Mayor, Councilor Grosso.
Just a comment,
so forth.
I don't support going below option B. I think the mayor's question was, in terms of trying to move the discussion, is if you're comfortable with A as a top and you're comfortable with option B as a bottom, if there's someone who's an outlier on either end, speak your piece. If Councilor Smith or somebody else was going to say something, then we ought to, I'll respond to Councilor Whitehouse, I don't agree, so I'm between A and B. So if there's anyone who wants to move it below B, we ought to get a straw.
That's great. That's exactly the intention, and I appreciate Councilor Whitehouse because he responded perfectly to that and say, I had something below B. I want to get feedback, further feedback specifically about Councilor Whitehouse's suggestion. Councilor Grosso, and then.
Yes, thank you, Your Honor. Councilor Whitehouse, I would like to have you let us know what services you would see the city losing with each of these departments cutting their budget by 1%.
I don't want to micromanage. It's up to, we pay department heads to make that decision. If they can't make that decision, then we take action.
Well, the thing is, if we get our trash picked up every 2 or 3 weeks instead of every week,
No.
are you going to take the phone calls because you don't talk to people? So
I don't think it'll amount, I don't think it'll come to that point. It won't come to that point. Come on.
I just, and in the
Break it
fire
up.
department,
Reminds me
Police
of the
on
band.
scooters?
Yeah, sure.
the fire department and the police
Reminds me of
department,
the band and
we'll
the
have to,
baseball.
we'll have to lose some of their services. And also with the school departments, we'll be dealing with larger classrooms and
Counsel,
supplies that can't
I've
be
heard
ordered.
all those scare tactics before. I've been around a little while, and they don't faze me one single
I
bit.
know.
We've gone through this before.
Well, let me just take from that interchange that Councilor Grosso opposes
I do.
Councilor Whitehouse's suggestion.
How did you get that message?
What's it? There's the old saying that I forget who it was. Maybe it was Paul McEachran. When you got the votes, vote. When you don't, talk. Councilor Dwyer.
I favor option A, but I want to acknowledge the truth of what Councilor Whitehouse said in a way, and that is that I think we all know that we have some major expenses coming on the horizon.
Absolutely.
The thing that I think our departments have done, or at least some of them have done, is to begin to respond to that over the long haul. And we've actually heard some of them talk about that. We have to do our work over the long haul too, as contracts come up. I think that the right sizing of staffing is something you don't do, overnight. And we've heard several of our, it's all about labor, and we've heard several of our departments struggle with that over the last couple of years and begin working toward it. If people don't continue working toward right-sizing labor, we will really be in a very challenged position, as Councilor Whitehouse says. But I do think we've heard from our departments, and we've seen it happen over the last 2 years, at least of how some of the departments are attempting to address that longer-term issue. I am not worried about bonding. Sometime we can talk about why. I know it's something you always bring up, but it's the bonding I don't worry about, given where our bonding position is and given arbitrage, leverage, whatever. However, I do think that the labor is something over the long haul we have to worry about. I think our departments and our commissions are worrying about it. I think they're thinking hard about how to reorganize labor, how to do things that do not require a higher level payment staff with a lower payment staff, but I also acknowledge that those things can't happen overnight. And most of all, I just don't believe in arbitrary across-the-board cuts, and I don't think that is our job. I don't think that's the opposite of micromanaging. I don't think macromanaging has anything to do with across-the-board cuts. So I think we're on the right path, and I don't feel we ought to, I don't feel we can at this point fairly push it further than we have.
Okay, Councilor Reynolds.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, that was very well said, I think, by Councilor Dwyer. I think that I'm comfortable with option A as the budget. I think that the process that we went through, looking at the budgets that each of the departments prepared very carefully, came in and defended to us, talked about their missions and their tasking, and the fact that in a year when there were several non-discretionary parts of their budget, like energy and well, I always think that's a little discretionary, but difficult to control with the external pricing. Health, the retirement fund, the health insurance, things that were at double-digit increases, the fact that each of our departments brought us budgets that reflect, the single-digit 4 to 6 range that we got, I think reflects a lot of work. And I didn't, as we went through each of the presentations, I didn't see any fluff or any extra positions. In terms of the discretionary funding that they have, I think it's down as low as it can go, and I similarly don't agree with at the last minute sort of making an arbitrary cut. I think that really kind of disrespects all the hard work they've done and can be very disheartening. I agree that what we've seen in this budget year is an understanding by the department heads that with their budgets so driven by personnel, they have to be more efficient. Councilor Grasso mentioned, the school department is going to try to deliver full-day kindergarten within the budget. The fire department wanting to have that new inspector position, which I think is investment in prevention, is good. So I am comfortable with option A, and I think that the taxpayers would be getting a very carefully crafted and responsible budget.
Okay, other comments specifically on Councilor Whitehouse's request? Councilor Smith?
Thank you, Your Honor. When we came up with these two options, it was a lot of hard work by the city manager sitting down with the department heads too. And option B is in front of us. And before I'm comfortable with leaving option B and kind of retreating to A, as I feel, is I'd like to ask the city manager if he has any suggestions where the 100,000 could be, or would it be appropriate to have the city manager sit down with the department heads and say, look, at this point, the city council would like to move another $100,000, and maybe they can work it amongst themselves, and then we come back here another night and say yes, no, or where we are. Not that I want to try to make another work session, but maybe as a council we say, you know, we're close, but we're not quite there yet, and let the people who are actually put their budgets together say, well, maybe I can move this and move that, and come up with, and hey, maybe at the end of it they could come up with 125,000.
Well, here, hold on one second.
They only come up with 75.
Hold on, Councilor. One thing. Good question. Hold the thought one second.
We still have the timeline.
Well, just hold the thought one second. I want to close the door or not on that, because that goes back to the discussion on B, kind of closing the window.
Well, it kind of goes back on the discussion Councilor Whitehouse had, which is maybe we can do better then. And that's why I'm saying, let's go back to the department heads and the city manager and say, can you guys, who knows, maybe they can come up with 125,000 and be a little higher than B. Or they can only come back with 75,000 and this is as tight as we have it. But allow them to go back and with more or less a consensus of the city council to say, we're almost there. Is there anything else you guys can do?
Councilor Hines.
You know, one thing that I could be wrong about, but 1% of an operating budget where some of these departments have about 85% committed and there's no way you can reduce, that 1% magnifies into 7 times 7%.
Yeah.
Not 1%.
Well, I hear what Councilor Smith is saying. Councilor Penelagos, I'm sorry.
Yes, I have a hard time with B because I look at it this way. We hire these department heads. We pay them good salaries. They have their help. They work very hard to get a budget out to us. And we sat here with no knowledge whatsoever about their everyday operation and asked to go after another $100,000. That out of an $86 million budget or whatever it is, isn't even a penny, really, to people. I mean, we're just nickel and diming again, and we need to have some faith in our department heads instead of taking and saying, well, cut here, cut here, cut here. Maybe we ought to put the police on scooters and have the kids bring in their own toilet paper, and we'd get that 100,000.
Well, let me. Points well made. I just want to suggest this, because we're trying to find where the center is or the consensus is or is not. I'm hearing only one person, maybe Councilor Smith, I don't want to misrepresent where you may be on this, one or two people who are suggesting that they would like to explore or would favor going lower in terms of total increase than option B. Is that an accurate statement? Yes. Okay, so let me take a straw vote on that. Who would like? Well, who is in favor of what Councilor Whitehouse has proposed? Okay, who opposes it? Okay, just kind of get that one off the docks here. Councilor Smith, you've mentioned something a little different.
Right. Yeah, I'm just saying, and I have all the due respect to every department head here. I've worked with a lot of them in other capacities in the city for the past 14, 15 years. And I know how hard these guys work. All I'm asking for is, I was put here by the taxpayers of the city to try to watch those pennies. And now, all I'm asking for is, instead of trying to push something through tonight, we still have time, the school department will still have time to do their budget, is can we get a consensus of the city council to say, we're almost there, instead of us trying to go and say, well, we want to get $100,000 more, because allow them to go back and say, maybe there's something creative that they can do and say, yeah, we can come up with 100,000, or maybe it's only 75, or they could come back and say it could be higher than 100,000. I don't see why we have to do it tonight with allow the city manager to go back with the staff and just see if there's something creative they can come up with. I know how hard these guys work. I know they put a lot into their budgets, but at the same time, it does come down to the pennies, and the pennies belong to the taxpayers.
Councillor Hines?
I look at this budget and the suggestions that have been made, and after seeing the devastation that credit card budgeting has caused the many, many families, I wonder if we want to bring the city into that area. I just see this as a very solid recognition of our obligations, and we have done the very best we could do, as every one of these departments have done, and it took them a long time to get here. Now, I don't want to take this meeting to make major changes in what has been created.
Let me perhaps cut to the chase a little bit, because at this point, it's a lot of talking about, again, what at ballpark is, I'm hearing everybody saying that they would favor the first option, A. I'm hearing nobody, virtually, no consensus to go deeper than B. Is there anybody here who would make the argument for option B? Let me go with the assistant mayor first.
I'll make the argument, and then I'll explain that I could vote for A today very easily, and I could vote for B today very easily, because sometimes what happens in a public discussion that's emotional to a degree, and a very civil and appropriate discussion I might compliment my fellow councilors on, is that you end up having that day in court so you can talk about the budget, and it's that last $100,000, and yeah, it is the taxpayers' money. Would I be curious, having all the respect in the world for our department heads, could they find $100,000 and not impact services? Yes. I suspect they could, and if they can't, I'd be happy to hear that from them as well. But I think it ultimately becomes a symbolic $100,000, and given the magnitude of the budget, I think Laura's comments are right about nickel and diming. I could support either, but I will go with my fellow councilors on this, because I think it becomes, if it's $500,000, it's different to me, I guess. And I guess with the $100,000, it's not on an order of magnitude to really sway me one way or the other. But the reason I asked the question is I thought I might get an answer that, yeah, we could do it. So that's pretty much where I am.
I saw a couple hands on. So, okay, that was somebody saying, yeah, I could support option B. I'm not going to go to the mat for it because, I'm paraphrasing, the difference between option A and option B is $100,000 out of $80 million. Okay, any other arguments for option B? Let me go with Councillor Smith and then Councillor Whitehouse.
I'll be brief. Why can't we just go back and ask the question? If they come back and say, nope, this is it, we can't be creative on it, this is exactly what we need, fine, I will vote for option A immediately. But I don't see why we just can't ask the question and have the meeting held and have the city manager come back to us.
Councillor Whitehouse?
The inflation rate is only 2.7%, and it was mentioned at a public hearing. Try to keep within that range, 3.5%. As I look at the percentages now, the municipal is getting 4.5% under option B. The police department is getting 6.6. Fire department is getting 6.1. The school department is getting 5.7. It's not like we're not giving them a decent percentage increase over the previous budget year. I mean, all I'm trying to say is there'll never be another chance. such as we're having this year. This is my 32nd year of putting together some sort of a budget for the municipality. And I've never seen a budget that was able to cut and give the taxpayers a break for 1 year as it has been for this one. And that's why I like to lower the tax rate as much as possible.
So you would favor?
Below the 60 cents per thousand rate that's set for option B. I want to bring it down to the 50-cent range.
Okay, but
55,
Your Honor,
55.
perhaps we could propose, perhaps we could collect ourselves, take a deep breath, and have a recess for 5 minutes. And I would propose that, and perhaps come
second
back.
okay, 5 minute, and I know there are a lot of folks here, 5 minutes. So 8:25, let's just get here and complete the conversation.
I stand chastised.
We are on. I believe. Okay, we're on. Okay. I think we're really, really close. 2 hours into it. Actually, we're probably not that far from where we started, I suspect. But we all, nobody, as a group, consensus, we don't want to go lower than B. As a group, we're all fine with A, which really is a baseline when you think about what A represents. Does anybody want to suggest anything between A and B? Okay. Who here? You get the choice of A or B. I'm going to start with B. Who here, in choosing between A and B, would choose B? Okay. Who would choose A? A it is.
Time to go home.
Good night.
And the non-operating is the same figure with 25,000 moved. If I want to make sure I understand that correctly, 25 grand into Pierce Island, 25 out of the 100 total for the traffic signal line. Okay.
Even Steven, right?
Net
that's
zero.
correct.
That's right.
Yep.
Okay. Councilor Smith.
Thank you. I just want to thank the city manager for taking that recess and going around speaking to the department heads to see if there was any fine tuning they can do. They came back and they said, no, I'm comfortable with that because I have respect and applaud their hard work that they do, and I appreciate the questions being asked.
Very good. Appreciate all your time. Appreciate your patience out there. And next step is next week.
Right, I'd like to review
Yeah.
the resolutions.
Oh, yeah, of course. Yep.
So this is what you would get.
Anything to argue over?
I hope not, but you never know.
Sounds like you got a law.
You're
We have
ready.
these resolutions, and now, I guess the question for the city council is, do you want to try to accomplish this on Monday night or Tuesday night? Because I need to put the agenda together. So what I need to do is before I do that, let's just quickly go through. I have a cover sheet for you. And the first resolution that you would look at would be the overall resolution adopting the general fund. And you can see that we break it down to municipal, police, fire, school, non-operating. And the total would be $79,858,802. That would be with the the $570,000 reduction from option A. So that would be the resolution 1 to adopt for the general fund. The next resolution would be on the municipal fees. As you recall, the municipal fees is about $832,000, or 1% of the total general fund revenues. There was a memorandum that was circulating from Ross Wilson that indicated the Rec Board and Pierce Island Committee met and want to raise the non-resident fee from $10 per launch to $25 per launch. Russ is recommending that we put this through the process. Next year, we'll put it into the fee committee, and we'll adjust it for next year. For the fee committee, I think Councilor Whitehouse, we talked earlier, I don't think you have any objection to that, given we have a lot of things printed up already relative to the costs. We have the brochures out that basically talk about the $10. We're really not talking about a significant revenue at that point, but we will diary it in for next year and add that to the fee committee's review next fiscal year. Then you have the resolution number 3, and that is to set the expenditure levels for user rates for the sewer fund. And again, as described, we are going to a 2-tiered system. As we've been discussing this in multiple meetings before, the idea is that anybody with 10 units or below on a monthly basis would be at a rate of $4.89. Anybody with 10 units and above would be at $5.33 per unit. And 80% of our residential customers fall in the 10 units or less. The idea is, as we start adding to our infrastructure and as there are larger users, those people will pay for that. Same holds true with resolution number 4 with the water fund. So again, higher users, again, when we find wells or we have to activate a well, it may be a major infrastructure cost. The same type of premises holds with any other utility, like electrical, if you're a bigger user and depending on how you use your, with the time of day, et cetera. But this would then affect the larger users. And then resolution number 5 allows special revenues and designated fund balances. This allows the city to expend from designated fund balance donations and federal and state grants as they're accepted and received. So as we come in with those grants and donations and things of that sort, those monies come in and we're allowed to expend those. So you're authorizing me to do that through the budget process. And finally, the resolution number 6 deals with the adoption of the annual investment policy. State law requires us to annually adopt this policy for every city and town in New Hampshire. And those are the 6 resolutions that you would see before you and on Monday night. And that would, and what I guess I need to understand is if you want to do it Monday night, we could put it on. And I know that we have it scheduled for Tuesday night. We have a special meeting. If you want to do it then, fine, I guess. But
If I could, unless there's something somebody has a radical change of mind between the conversation we've just had now and next week, this would take not very long to do Monday.
Monday night.
Monday night.
Let's do it Monday night.
Sold.
Okay.
And does that cancel Tuesdays?
That would eliminate the need for Tuesday night's meeting.
Is there a Red Sox game Tuesday?
Oh, it's all done. Anyway, Monday night it is? Monday night it is. Counselor Hines.
No,
Oh,
I'm just
sorry.
voting
Oh, okay.
for it. Yeah.
There you go.
Move adjournment?
Well, I don't think we need to, as it's a work session. But unless that's it, we're done. Appreciate your time. Thanks very much.
Thanks, Sean.